Oh yeah, I got a big box of scoop mail. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So you saw the beginning of the video. I have actually not one, but 3 gigantic boxes of parts that I need to put into this thing in hopes of getting it ready for Lammy Jimmy, which is in about 2 weeks. So, yeah, guys, wish me luck. Let's get to it. All right, guys, I spent a good 3 hours yesterday actually cleaning everything up. All the engine case, you can see I've got it completely stripped down, got the mounts removed from it, linkages and things like that. So this case is almost completely stripped down. I got the other parts cleaned up, like the shrouds, the kickstart cover, the cylinder head, cylinder itself, and also the mag housing back there. And of course the bike. Once I took the motor out of it, all these little hard to reach spots, I could actually get to them and actually remove all the grease and grime that was caked up in them. So yeah, looking at this thing, it's actually really in good shape. I mean, there's nothing really rusted out. It's just surface rust here and there, which I think adds character to it, and I actually love that look. So let's begin by actually putting in the new engine mounts. I got these BGM ones here, and also the bearings, and that way I can actually mount this thing back into the frame, and that way I don't have to use this little ghetto strap method because I don't have an engine stand. Surprisingly, for these BGM engine mounts, also called silent blocks, it came with a little instruction sheet. So on the rubber itself, there's an arrow. It also has an L. That's for the left side. Left side meaning when you're sitting on the bike, your left hand, okay? So this is the left side. I went ahead and put a mark here at 12 o'clock, like it says right here. So the arrow needs to point at 12 o'clock, and I also put a mark on the outside of the mount. So that way, when I'm actually installing it, I can actually see that it's sort of lined up while I'm pulling it in. Doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you get close, should be fine. So to install this, you need the silent block installation tool. I don't have the BGM one. This is the Lambretta one, so it should work just the same. So to use this, it's put this here, put that there, and then put the stopper on the other side and the nut, and then you slowly tighten it, and it'll pull the mount into the case. Before I do that, I'm going to heat this this arm up so it expands the aluminum a little bit, and I'm going to grease this up so it'll slide in a little easier. You could throw these in the freezer to shrink them a little bit, but logically speaking, if this thing is scorching hot and this thing is cold, as soon as it touches each other, this thing's going to get hot and expand again. I would understand if it was something that was so tight that you could just drop it in there real quick. It would probably work, but me having to actually twist this thing on, which will take me a couple minutes, it doesn't really make any sense. So that's why I don't usually freeze them. Okay, so let's get this thing hooked up, and then we'll get them installed. Okay, I've got my silent block installer tool set up, and really all I need to do is hold this nut here and turn this nut here, and it should slowly pull it together. All right, that's it. Pretty easy. All right, okay, let's do the same thing on the other side. Okay, that's it. Before I put the case back into the frame, I'm going to install all new bearings. These are actually all from Scooter's Originality. Rob hooked me up. This is the drive side bearing right here. This is actually Taiwanese. I don't know if it's any better than the Russian bearing, but this one feels pretty good. So we'll go ahead and put that in. This one actually also has a seal on this side. Of course, the GP crank bearing. This is from Scootopia, also from Rob Originality. Put that in later. and of course the rear output shaft or lay shaft bearing, which goes here. This one's made by BGM, so I don't know where this comes from. Yeah, let's start with putting that one in. So what I'm gonna do, of course, is heat the case up, and then we'll hopefully drop it in. If not, we'll tap it in with this little drift I have here. Again, it's up to you if you want to freeze these things or not, but like I said, unless it literally just dropped right in and you didn't do anything else, as soon as it touches and there's a little caddy, it's going to heat right back up. So totally up to you what you want to do. So all right, let's start by heating the case up. Well, that was pretty easy. Okay, so for the drive side bearing, it comes pre-greased already. So there's a cover on this side. The cover will face towards the crank. This is to keep the fuels from actually going back into the transmission. All right, so remember that. Usually the ones that don't have the seal, I think the highlight washer we will put here will take care of that problem. But this one has a seal, so we'll put it the right way. Okay, that was not bad either. All right, let's since it's out here in the open, I'm gonna go ahead and put the seal plate back in, because it's actually nice and easy this way. So let's go put the new seal in the seal plate, and then we'll get that reinstalled. Okay, so for this bike, I'm gonna be using the BGM Viton seals. Apparently, these resist oils and fuels a little better than the other ones. Honestly, I think these other ones are just fine, but I'm a little bougie, so I spent a couple extra dollars on these nicer seals. But anyways, first thing I'm gonna do is pop this seal out of the seal plate, just like that. Next thing I'm gonna do is wire wheel that extra highlight washer residue off, and then we'll install the new seal. All right, I've got the seal plate all cleaned up. I'm gonna put a new seal on. First, I'm gonna put some grease on the lip here. Help with the installation. All right, so usually you just push this on, but if not, I have the little drift right here. I'll give it a couple taps. Okay, perfect. I have a brand new crank here. It's a GP crank. It tapers completely different from your LI crank. Actually looks a lot beefier. Okay, so this is actually a long stroke crank, but since I have the seal installed into the seal plate, I want to make sure this actually goes over the crank effortlessly before I actually put the seal plate in, because I watched a video, I'm not sure whose it was, but the seals were manufactured wrong. So no matter how many times he tried to fit this plate over the crank, it kept catching the lip and popping the spring out. So this one seems to be good. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get the highlight washer and install that between this guy and the actual bearing itself. And then I forgot, I actually have to set the squish on this crank, so I'm gonna have to leave the motor out of the frame to do so. So yeah, hopefully that's not too big of a deal. So let me finish installing this, then we'll put the crank into it, and then we'll rebuild the mag housing, get that together, and then we'll try to set the squish. Okay, so I have a brand new highlight washer here. I honestly think that this is, if you had an open bearing, you would use this. Again, this is to keep the fuel and oils out of the transmission. But we'll go ahead and put this one back in anyway. Might actually help with sealing. So That never hurts. All right, next up we have the plate with a freshly installed seal. We're going to put in. Okay, that's good. Okay, so next I have the 4 screws. These were actually peened into the seal plate, but I took those out. So this time we're going to use Loctite instead. Just a little dab on the end before we actually reinstall them. All right, now that I have all the screws into the seal plate, we're going to torque them down to 3.6 foot-pounds, which is around 44 inch-pounds. Okay, so like I said, I have a brand new crank, long stroke crank, so we will need to install the inner race on the fly side bearing. So this is the inner race. So you want to heat this up with a hair dryer or a heat gun rather than a torch, because that actually changes the properties of the metal when you heat it up too much. So I'm gonna heat that up, and then I actually have this drift especially made for that. So I'm gonna put this over like this and hold this guy like a baby and kind of tap it on. I guess you can put it on the vise too, and use a wedge, but this is the way it tells you to do it in the book, so I'm going to follow the book. Alright, so let's heat the inner race up real quick. Alright. Holding this guy like a baby. Oh, actually it fell right on. Okay. Don't need to hammer on it. Cool, I'll wait for this to cool down and then we'll go ahead and install it into the case. Alright, before we actually install the crank, you want to put some oil on the seal. Just this lip here, so it helps with seating properly. Here, and also I'm going to put some on the crank. Here. That way it doesn't catch the lip of the seal when you actually go to put this into the case. Okay. So when you can put this in, you want to turn the crank so that the rod is almost inside the crank, and you pivot it in like this. Once that's in position, I'll go ahead and strap the case back down, and we're going to use my crank puller to install it the rest of the way. Okay, so to pull the crank the rest of the way into the case, I'm using my Lambretta crank pulling tool. So it's pretty simple. Make sure you have this collar on there, and then after that you want to thread this bolt into the crank itself. Quick peek in there, make sure I didn't knock the spring off the seal, and it's good, nice and square. Hold the bolt and turn the nut. Oh. Okay, that's it. Take the tool off. All right, crank's fully seated into that drive side bearing. Very cool. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and get the mag housing rebuilt, and then we'll go ahead and install it on the other side of the case. Okay, so next up we have the mag housing. I'm going to go ahead and change the outer race of that crank bearing and all the seals, of course. So first thing we're going to do is remove this snap ring. A little tight. Remove the seal. Seal's falling apart. So after that is a spacer. I'm going to stack these in the way it was removed. So bearing, clip, seal, spacer, bearing. All right, so let's heat the Magneto housing up, and some people say that if you heat it up long enough, it'll drop right out of there, but I have never experienced that. So we'll try again, see if it works. If not, we'll have to tap it out with a drift. Of course it didn't work for me, so let's tap it out. Honestly, don't think that's working either. Actually, yeah, it is. Okay. Maybe not. All right, I'm gonna put this guy in my press. I really don't like beating on things if I don't have to, so I got my press. So the guy that says you can just heat it and it'll fall right out, yeah, I seriously doubt it, but hey, maybe you got lucky. Alrighty, outer race removed along with the seal. Okay, let's get the new stuff installed and we can move on with connecting this thing back to the engine. Okay, so obviously it mangled up the bearing when I pressed it out with the press. So there's an order of which this stuff goes in. First is the seal, as you can see here, it's all mangled up. Then is this little washer or cap that actually seals the seal in there. Then the bearing, and then there was a spacer here, and then the inner seal, and then the snap ring. Now we're not going to need the spacer anymore because on the GP crank bearing is actually wider, you see. Okay, so you're going to remove that spacer and install this bearing, and it'll be spacer removed, so you have the seal and the snap ring, and that's it. This is something that's in the Sticky's book, but it's not very clear about it. They don't actually show you like an order or whatever of how everything goes. They just tell you to remove the spacer, and you don't know if it's that or this or whatever. So, so since I crushed that other little seal cap, whatever that goes after the seal, I have a new one here. So yeah, if you do this and you have to press that bearing out, make sure you order this guy as well. Okay. So I have a new seal, a Viton seal. The cap that goes over the bearing, like that. And the other seal, which is here, I think. Yep. That. And then, no, it goes like this. That. And then the circlet. That. Okay. So we'll put that in the exact same order into there. Okay, so before you begin, make sure the mag housing is being supported by something. Okay, I have a little roll of tape right here. This should work just fine. If I have to tap on it, nice and solid. Okay, don't just lean it like this, because you're depending on this area to hold the mag housing up. So put it here, it's a little stronger. Just This is closer to the center. All right, so to install the first seal, I have a seal drift, especially made for this seal. This is from Lambretta. Before I actually press it in there, I'm going to put some grease on the lip. It will help with the installation. Okay. Hopefully I can just push this in and not have to use a hammer, but white ton seals are a little harder than your standard ones. Almost there. Yep, almost there. Okay. Give it a little tap if you want, but don't beat the crap out of it. Okay. Next is this little cap spacer thing. The flat side is going to go against the seal. Okay. So that's good. Next, we'll put the bearing in it. I really don't want to heat this thing up because the seal is in there. And it's poisonous when you actually start melting that seal. So I'm gonna go ahead and press this guy into the housing again. I'm gonna heat it up a little bit, but like I said, I'm trying not to melt that seal that's in there. So let's heat it up a little bit, and then actually put some grease around the bearing just to help it go in, and then I'll actually press it in. Alright, as you can see, I've tried to keep the flame away from the seal. So this bearing has letters in it. I'm going to do the letters facing outward, just like the OEM bearing was. Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, so I got my little contraption here to make sure I'm keeping pressure off the outer part of the mag housing. That way I don't crack it when I'm pressing this guy in. So I got my little drift here. It's about the right size. Pressing it in. That is not square. Hold on one second. Okay, let's see. Try to correct this thing real quick. Yeah, that's not square. Okay, let me try to tap on it real quick and square it up a little bit before we keep pressing. All right, I got it mostly in, but I'm gonna stop tapping on it and I'm gonna use the press. Alrighty. That's fully installed and melt the seal. We're good to go. Now this is looks like a sealed bearing, but I'm gonna pack grease in there anyways, because that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, now we've got the outer seal, that little spacer cap thing, bearing. Now we have this seal, the inner seal. Put some grease on the lip here. And I have the other seal drift, also from Lambretta. This one's going to require some. Okay, I've got this thing completely assembled. I guess the seal is just a little bit thicker than the original one. So when I went to put the snap ring back in, it didn't really snap in easily. So I had to kind of tap the snap ring a little bit until it snapped back in place. After that, you fill the rest of the areas, gaps inside with grease, and this is ready to be installed back onto the case. Now, before you do that, make sure this surface here is completely clean, and also this surface here is completely clean. All right, so usually I will put Yamabond 4 on this surface and Yamabond 4 on that surface, gasket, and then kind of bolt it all back together. But I have this BGM gasket, mag housing gasket, and it's got a thin bead of silicone on it already. There and there. So I'm gonna trust it. Hopefully there's no air leaks, but after I get this thing fully assembled. So to install this, it only goes one way. The lettering is facing upward. This little protrusion right here will face forward. So it will go on like this. Okay, it only goes on one way, like I said, and then the holes will line up. So you see all three these little holes here, and the studs, of course. So that's good to go. After that, simply, actually not simply, put some 2-stroke oil onto the crankshaft, just so it helps with the installation. It doesn't catch the seal lips, because there's 2 seals you got to get over this this thing. So coat that up real nice. It doesn't hurt anything if you put too much. So there you go. Now we can slide this thing over the crankshaft. Okay. Make sure it still spins freely. If it does, you should be good to go. Okay, once that's on, you want to put new wave washers here, here, and here, and there's 3 10mm nuts, torqued to 3.6 foot-pounds or 44 inch-pounds. All right, let's do that now. Okay, I got the mag housing completely reinstalled onto the case. So next up, we need to set the squish for the new crankshaft. This is a long stroke crank, 110mm with a 60mm rod. So yeah, we need to set the squish, otherwise the piston will hit the top of the cylinder. So yeah, let's do that now. Alright guys, so you can see I've got the piston temporarily reinstalled onto the rod. Okay, now like I mentioned earlier, this is a longer stroke crank. Okay, that means that it's 3mm longer than the original one. This is 60mm and the original one is 57mm. That's the rod spec. So if I left it alone, just put whatever gaskets in between, at the top of the stroke, the piston is going to hit the cylinder head. So we need to take up that extra stroke by putting in the proper packer base plate, whatever you call this thing. So I have different thicknesses. This is a 2.5 that's in here. I also have a 3mm. So the idea is put the packer on and actually slip the cylinder over. And what I'm trying to do is, at the piston at the bottom of the stroke, it needs to clear the exhaust port, which is that right there, bottom of the exhaust port. Okay, so we need to figure that out first, and then we can actually adjust the squish, which is the distance between the top of the cylinder and the cylinder head. So like I said, I have the piston in here. I don't have any rings in it. I don't have the circlips in it because it's just temporary. It's just for fitting purposes. So I went ahead and put some 2-stroke oil in there because you don't want it to be dry when you're moving the piston up and down on the cylinder. All right, so slip this guy on first. All right, now the bottom of the stroke. All right, guys, so this is what I'm talking about, okay? So right now the piston is all the way at the bottom of the stroke, okay, right there. All right, Now the idea is to get the top of the piston, that little edge right there, to line up with the edge of that exhaust port. Okay, this is actually port timing. I'm not that smart. I don't know about port timing, what makes a difference. I'm just trying to get this thing done, so I'm following John's directions. So the idea is to get the piston to line up with that port right there. Okay, so right now I have a 2.5 millimeter packer in there, and the piston's a little too low. Okay, I'm probably about a 0.5 millimeter difference. So I'd say putting either a 1.5 millimeter packer or a 2 millimeter packer should fix that. So once that's done, like I said, I'm gonna adjust the space between the top of the piston and the actual cylinder head that goes on. So hopefully you guys are following me, but that's what you're supposed to do with the long stroke crank. All right, so I don't have a 1.5 millimeter base plate or packer. I do have a 2 millimeter, which is this. So hopefully this works, because if it doesn't, I'm just gonna send it anyway. I think it doesn't really, it might affect performance a little bit, but I don't have time to wait for the 1.5 millimeter if it doesn't work. So let me get this put on and we'll see what we get. All right, guys, so this is the 2 millimeter packer plate in there, and I'd say it's pretty much perfect. I mean, I feel a little lip there, but I'm gonna tighten this all down, and I'm pretty sure it'll be perfect after that. Okay, now let's try to set the squish. Okay, so yeah, without any solder in there, it won't even go past TDC. So this head gasket's way too thin. It's a 1 millimeter. I'm going to, I got no choice. I have to order another one. Okay, so back to square one. I just spent an hour online seeing how people set this thing up. And at first I was looking for a 3 mil head gasket, which they don't have, so that'll be something custom. Then I was reading, and it seems that a lot of people run the 3 mil packer with a 1 mil head gasket, and that seems to give them the proper squish. So, I mean, really, I don't have a choice. We are on a time crunch, so that's what I'm gonna do. 3 mil packer, 1 mil head gasket. As long as the squish is good, I'm gonna run it like that. And see how it runs. Hopefully it runs okay. If not, we'll have to maybe get a new cylinder or something. Yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, we'll try that and see what happens. Okay, so I just tried temporarily with a 1 mil head gasket and a 3 mil packer. It's still touching the head, so I used the original one that came on the bike, which is 1.6. Let's see what that does. Okay, so right now I have a 3 mil packer with a 1.6 millimeter head gasket, and it seems to go full stroke. So now let's put a piece of solder in there and see what kind of a squish we get. Okay, so I have a 3 mil packer in there and a 1.6 millimeter head gasket. So I have a piece of solder in there right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and rotate the flywheel and hopefully it goes over. And it did. Okay, take this thing off and check it. Want to know what it looks like? It's like that. All right. So let me just check. Squish. Yeah, 1.2, lowest spots. Honestly, I think it's I'm having so many problems is because this casting on this Spanish cylinder head is terrible, to be honest with you. I mean, look at it. It's just really bad. I mean, if you're gonna ask if there's a difference between an Italian Lambretta and a Serveta, yes, there are, and this is one of them. So, cases, cylinder head, yeah, they're not cast as nice as the Italian pieces. But anyways, I think this will pass. It might affect the performance a little bit, but I really don't have a choice. You know, it's either I run it like this or I blow it up. So I'd rather not blow it up and just sacrifice some performance. So yeah, again, 3mm packer, 1.6 millimeter cylinder head gasket, and I think that'll work for now. Like I said, if performance is horrible, then I'll probably upgrade the cylinder, whatever it is, or whatever I got to do to make it work. Yeah, it is what it is. You can always solve a problem by throwing more money at it. Alright, so now that I have the squish and the clearance is somewhat figured out, we'll go ahead and reinstall the piston properly. So I went ahead and put all the rings back on. So the rings have to sit. The gap has to come through the little pin that comes out of the ring on the 3 rings, actually. There's 3 pins. So I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about. Right there. See a little pin right there? That's where the ring's going to sit on all 3. So they're all in different positions. So there's one there, and the last one's over here. So you got to compress each one and slide the cylinder on. Or you can actually install this into the cylinder and then actually install this over the rod. But I do it the other way. I don't know why. I just do it that way. It's a little easier than actually having a big cylinder, heavy cylinder sitting right here while you're trying to get the wrist pin back in. But it's up to you how you want to do it. Alright, so putting this back onto the crank, there's 2 shims that go in between, in here and here. And then there's going to be the shim, rod, shim. Alright, so hopefully I can line this up. Might be a pain in the butt, actually. Alright, let me put the wrist pin back in. I've already installed one of the circlips on one side, and this side I'll leave open because that's where the wrist pin will go in. So on the piston, you'll see there's a little arrow right here that points towards the exhaust. It's on all pistons. If there's IN on the piston, it means intake, so it should point towards the intake. All right, so but typically you come with an arrow, point that towards the exhaust. Okay, so I've got the piston back onto the rod with the shims and the new wrist pin bearing. Circlips in, the rings are on. So next up, I'm gonna be installing the packer. I will be using Yamaha 4 on both sides, a thin layer of it before I install it. Then I'll put the cylinder on, and then I'll do the same thing with the head gasket. Now on the cylinder itself, I'm using a BGM Sport exhaust, and this is the manifold for it. So I'm gonna check this, but you do have to grind down 2 of the fins on the cylinder, otherwise this guy doesn't sit flat onto the cylinder. So be aware of that if you're going to go and do a rebuild and then you put this exhaust on it. Gotta do a little bit of grinding on the fins, and then it should fit just fine. So I'm gonna do that before I actually install it onto the engine case. You don't want to be grinding and sending little metal flakes into the cylinder once it's all done. So yeah, let me just grind these 2 fins down real quick, and we should be able to reinstall the cylinder. Alright, see, now it actually sits flat with these 2 fins grinded down a little bit. Alright, so I'm probably going to spray some barbecue paint on there just so it doesn't rust. But then again, this thing's going to rust anyway. Alright, that's done. We can go ahead and finish the installation. Alright, like I said, I'll be applying a Yamaha Bond 4 on both the packer plate and also the head gasket, both sides. Alright, so I'm going to install a cylinder now, but I'm going to be compressing those springs at the same time I slide the cylinder on. Glad I didn't bolt the motor back into the frame, because this would be really difficult. One, two, okay. Got all three rings where they're supposed to be. I'll push the cylinder on. Alright, do the same thing with the head gasket. Apply Yamaha Bond 4 on both surfaces before I install it. Alright, now we'll put the cylinder head on one last time, hopefully. I do have new wave washers going in this thing, so let me grab those. Alright, new wave washers. Alright, torque one last time to 17 foot-pounds. Alright, let's hope that doesn't blow up. Okay, so I will be installing a new carburetor, a PHBH 25mm Delorto. You need a different manifold for that. You can't use the stock one. This is an MB scootering manifold. That should bolt on right there. The only thing that's the problem is that this stud is too short, so it actually came with a bolt here. So first thing we're gonna do is remove this stud real quick. This is M7, I believe. M7 stud remover. I think I got these from Lambretta, if I remember correctly. Okay, easy enough. Okay, so I have a new gasket for the intake manifold. Put a little bit of Jan 4 on this as well. This guy nice and tight. Alright, I got a washer and a lock washer under that bolt. This one I'm using the OEM nut with a new wave washer. So that should be good to go. Tighten this guy down. I don't know what the torque spec is, but nice and tight is good enough for me. Okay, so that should be sealed. Everything on this case should be sealed. Now, if I go to do a air leak test tomorrow, hopefully you got no leaks. But yeah, that's gonna be it for tonight. I'm gonna let this guy cure overnight. Okay, so I'll let this thing sit overnight. I'll let the Jan 4 cure itself. So hopefully this thing is nice and sealed up and airtight. So for me to check that, I'm using my air leak tester. I think this is from MB Development, and it comes with this block off plate for the exhaust, but it doesn't fit on here. I don't know if it's because the Spanish cylinder casting is not good. I can probably drill these holes bigger and it'll probably fit, but I'll worry about that later. So I actually made a rubber pad, and I actually made this plate a long time ago. And I've used this in the past, and this one worked just fine. So I'm gonna do the same, just leave this guy alone. So to do an air leak test, you need to block off the exhaust port, of course, and then plug the spark plug with the spark plug. And then I have this intake boot that will fit over the intake I installed last night. And that allows me to pump air into it. And hopefully it's nice and sealed up and airtight. I think the cylinder and the head is fine. I'm a little leery about the BGM mag housing gasket I used yesterday. Hopefully it's good, because it's the first time I've used it. So I have the spark plug reinstalled. I have this little plug with a little nipple in the middle, so I can actually pump air into the cylinder. So now let's pump some air into it and see if it holds. And off the bat, it's leaking. Okay, I'm sure you saw that. It's leaking out of the bolt holes for the stator. So I'm going to temporarily put some bolts in those little holes, and hopefully that seals it back up. Okay, so this is what happens when I trust a gasket with the pre-applied silicone. Air is actually leaking from every single one of these holes. And even with it plugged up, the bolts that I put in there still leaking through, especially these studs here. So now I have to pull the mag housing back off, apply Jan 4 on both surfaces, and then put it back together. So yes, guys, those BGM gaskets, yeah, they're no good. Might as well just buy a regular one and use Jan 4 on both sides before you assemble it. Yeah, it'd probably be a better option. Alright guys, so I removed this gasket, and I went back to the original one that came in the kit. I put Jan 4 down on the surface of the case, the Jan 4 on the mag housing. Now I'm going to sandwich them together. Now I went ahead and re-lubed the crank so it doesn't catch the seal lip. But I know this works because I did it on the raffle bike. I sealed it up perfectly. So try to get this guy on. And clean some of the sealant out of the thread holes. All right, I've got the thread holes cleaned up. I'm gonna go ahead and torque this guy down. 44 inch-pounds. This time I'm gonna go ahead and bolt the stator in. That way it actually compresses the two parts together. And then I'll let it sit for a couple hours and let it cure. And then I'll run another air leak test. I've got the stator installed. Like I said, that's so I can actually bolt the two pieces together with more contact points. So everything is torqued down. I'm going to leave this alone for a little while, and then I'll go ahead and do another air leak test later on. Okay, we got a lot of work to do, so I'm going to go ahead and bolt the engine back up to the frame, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the transmission and everything back into the case. All right, while we're waiting for the Yamabon 4 to cure on the mag housing, we'll go ahead and put the transmission back together. Starting with this output shaft, lay shaft. There's two ball bearings and a spring inside it. I mean, you don't really, I don't think you really have to do this, but you know, since I have it, why not? So to do this, you need to extract the two balls in the spring first. So I'm gonna use a plastic bag and pull this shifter across, you know, all the way out, and then you'll see that they popped out right there. So I'll replace it with the new ones. Okay, so to reinstall, I have my Vespa small frame, the shifter ball installer tool. It's really just, see that hole right there? Put one of these on one side, drop a ball in the spring, the other ball on this side, and then you push down on this other little bar that it comes with. I know BGM makes a Lambretta specific one. I don't have it, so I'll just use these, and they work just fine. All right, so that's it. Now I can go ahead and reinstall the lay shaft after I replace the O-ring, of course. All right, we got a new O-ring here. Go ahead and reinstall it onto the lay shaft. All right, just like that. Okay, when you go to reinstall, I don't know if you can see this, but make sure these little paw things go into this little slot on the shifter cross. I know I keep calling it shifter cross. I'm not sure what it's called for a Lambretta, but for a Vespa, it's called a shifter cross, but or a cruciform actually. So get it in like that, because that arm is what actually moves the shifter back and forth, changing the gears. All right, so on the other side, we're gonna have to pull the lay shaft all the way in, and I have a special tool for that. Okay, so here I have the MB development lay shaft installation tool. Again, didn't have instructions, but pretty sure I know how to use it. So this collar here goes over the lay shaft, and this screw here holds the lay shaft steady, because it is actually going into one of these grooves on the lay shaft. So the further you pull it in, you can move. I don't know if there's different lengths or whatever, but I guess you move it later on. So this actually keeps the lay shaft from spinning when you're turning this thing, and then this other one actually starts pulling the lay shaft in. So I'm gonna put some oil right here because it's a friction point, and then we'll start turning it. Like I said, that screw is actually holding the lathe shaft from spinning while I'm doing this. Okay, I think that's it. Or, you know what? There's 2 spots for that screw, so I'm guessing it's too far in. We need to undo this. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. So once you get further along, you actually have to move that screw because the lathe shaft is going in further in to that collar. And since the lathe shaft has ramps in the little grooves, I'm guessing it's touching one of them. So I'm gonna back this out a little bit, and I'm gonna tap on this a little bit to back it out, and then we'll move that screw over to the further point that's out. Okay, so I moved the screw from here to here because it's ramped at the end of that groove in the lathe shaft. So now we'll continue pulling this thing. Much better. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so now we can put the cover plates back on. Let's see. A little tricky. Alright, I've got new washers and nylock nuts this time. Torque these guys down to 3.6 foot-pounds. Alright, put the rear pads back on. Okay, before we put the rear brake pads back on, I'll put a little thin layer of grease on the pivot points. Not too much, because it could get into the pads. There, a little bit right there, a little bit right there. Good enough. I'm gonna put these brake pads back on. I like to assemble everything off the bike first, and then just put the top one on and work the bottom one. Like this. Okay. Rear brake plate. This has a spring washer and 2 circlips. Okay, that's pretty much done. Last thing, you put the shim in first, and then a little cone. This guy right here, of course, not going to easily go on. So there it is. Okay, last but not least, the hub right here. It's keyed, so you gotta make sure it goes on the splines correctly on the lathe shaft. What's going on? Okay, there you go. Being a pain. Okay. Next we have the wave washer, the nut. I can't tighten that right now. I need to have the wheel on and sit on it. The last one I did, I literally had to use all my weight to hold the bike down, and then I used a really big torque wrench to torque it down, so we'll leave that for last. Okay, so before we continue with the transmission assembly, we're going to replace the bearing here in the end plate. First thing we're going to do is remove the snap ring. I'm going to use my blind bearing puller for this. will set up. Now we're gonna twist it out of there. Okay, easy enough. Next I'll heat this up, and then we'll hopefully be able to drop the new one in there, and that'll be done. Okay, we'll put the snap ring back in, and this is done. Cool. On to transmission reassembly. Okay, so I made sure all these linkages and everything seem to work okay, move all right, nice and smooth. I did mark everything off before I took it all apart as far as these linkages and whatnot, so you need to do the same thing if you're going to decide to pull all this stuff off. So like I said, everything's good. There's 3 bearings in this area right here. So it's going to be this Christmas tree bearing, this old one that goes in here, okay, and there's one that goes here on the end of the lay shaft, and then the other one is the end plate bearing. So I did get a new one of these for the end of the Christmas tree, and the bearing only comes with the inner race, so they're not matched to the outer. So I'm just going to replace the inner. Should be okay. So I went ahead and greased this guy up a little bit. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, because I believe this bearing gets lubrication from the actual transmission, but doesn't hurt. I'll put some grease on it anyway. So after that, yes. So on the end of the Christmas tree there is a shim there, okay? Make sure this shim is still here. This guy right here, okay? Put that shim there and then install the Christmas tree, okay? That. After that, you can stack the gears in. Now, I'm just gonna reinstall the gears like exactly the same way I pulled them off. I already pulled them off, put them in this little bucket here, and I'm gonna do the same thing to reinstall. So this is 4th gear, right here. To match up the teeth with the Christmas tree, like that. 3rd gear. Sorry, that was 2nd gear. This is 3rd gear. This is 4th gear. That's it. So on the outside of the lay shaft, there is this washer or shim, and there's this shim as well. Okay. And then there's this bearing that goes there, but I got a new one of those, so I'll go ahead and put that in as well. There you go, just like that. End plate bearing, we already put a new one in, so this is the plate right here. Now make sure the 2 dowel pins are inside the case here. Usually come out with the end plate, or they just fall out when you're cleaning the case or whatever. So yeah, after that we can actually put the end plate on, and hopefully it just slides right on. Now we'll have to tap it in place. Let me see here. There you go. Okay. There you go. Now on the Christmas tree, the input shaft, there's a washer that goes right here. Okay, make sure you put that back. After that, we can actually put on all the hardware to bolt this thing back in place. So let me grab my torque wrench and we can reinstall the hardware. Okay, there's a sequence when torquing the end plate down, and that's clockwise from 1 to 6. Okay, so torque specs will be around 9 to 10 foot-pounds. So you have to torque them in this order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Okay, that's it. Okay, everything seems to be rotating okay, so I guess we'll find out when we start it up how it runs. Alright, on to the next thing, which is reinstalling the chain and the sprockets. As mentioned earlier, I do have a brand new chain. This is the old one. Not sure if it's either stretched out or it was just loose in there, but I'm replacing the chain anyway. So first off, we just need to verify it's the same length, and then actually have new tensioners and guides or whatever these are. Of course, again, doesn't come with instructions, so I'll have to figure it out. So these guys look like they are exactly the same. Okay, this is the evergreen chain tensioner from Piston Ported, and I think it's Pete suggested that I get these as well. This is the BGM, I guess, load spreader. So this actually covers more of the surface on these metal pieces rather than just a single bolt. Okay, so I guess we need to install these studs first into the case right here and there, and then we can go ahead and start installing this stuff. Loctite on the end of these studs before I install them. I guess this is how they go. The stud installer here. Let's see if we can tighten them up a little bit. All right, that's good. So next up, I will, I guess, put these guys on. So the bottom one overlaps the top, and the spreader plate here. Jeez. Yeah, I need to freaking open the hole up a little more on these guys. Ah, dang it. Okay. All right, let me do that real quick. The holes to this load spreader plate. I'm gonna leave these little nuts loose. So the chain tensioners, the bottom one overlaps the top one. At least that's how the factory is supposed to be. So now I'm gonna go ahead and install these guys. So let's see here. So I was wrong. This actually requires 2 bearings. The rear clutch basket. This guy right here. So I don't have a new one of the, I don't have 2 new ones of these, I only have 1. So I'm going to reuse this. Okay. So leave that there like that. That's good. I'll put the front drive cog, or whatever you call this thing, back on. Okay, that's good. This is the push drive. Go ahead and load the chain into it, and then we'll put it all together. That's that. This is like that. Okay. Okay, I guess that's how it's supposed to be. And then we'll raise this guy to tighten up the chain, which is already kind of tight, actually. You see. Yeah, it's actually really tight, and I barely even moved it. So I think that's the way it's supposed to be, that tight. So let me go ahead and just tighten these 2 nuts and see what we get. think an eighth inch movement is supposed to be the way it is. I'll tighten it a little more. If I'm not correct, somebody I'm sure will correct me. Yeah, I think that's good. Eighth inch movement. Okay. All right, everything seems to be rotating smoothly. Okay, so I have my clutch holding tool in the clutch basket. I have a new little locking washer thing. I have the clutch nut in. So first we're going to tighten the front sprocket, and to do that, make sure this guy here will go over the front drive thing up here. Make sure it goes in. Don't just kind of throw it on there and just throw the bolt on and then start tightening, because if these teeth aren't lined up, you're gonna have problems. All right, so get that. Okay, so the spring's really tight. Just like I said, make sure you keep an eye out on the teeth. Make sure they're lined up before you actually tighten it. You're doing it blind, but you kind of feel it. Like that, okay? After that's done, torque the front sprocket. They say it's 25 foot-pounds, but you can do a little more, so I'm just gonna do 28. Okay. All right, so the front bolt up here is 14 millimeter. The clutch nut is actually 22. Again, the front, I torqued it down to 28 foot-pounds. This big bolt nut back here, I'm going to go to 50 foot-pounds. Okay, 50 foot-pounds. I'm gonna knock one of these corners or the sides of this tab down to actually contact that nut. That way it won't back out. Okay, now the nut won't back out. Clutch reinstallation, I'm gonna use my clutch tool. So what you need to do is actually start putting everything back in, starting with this thing here. So before you put this in, you need the guide, which is this thing, and then you can put the springs in, or this guide actually holds the spring in place. So you're gonna put that there like that. Okay. Now make sure these springs are actually in the little cupped area in the clutch basket, and then also in this other spider basket thing. Once you compress this thing, you gotta make sure it's correct. All the springs are seated correctly. Otherwise, you're gonna have problems. So that's that. Next, we'll stack the clutches back exactly the same way. These clutches are not stuck together, so I'll need to break them apart. So kind of just leave that there like that, and then actually bolt your clutch tool in place. Okay. You're gonna need some 10 millimeter nuts, M6 by 10. Leave that there. Let me tighten this clutch compressor tool down. I have my clutch compressor bolted on. I have this center bolt pushing the springs into the clutch basket. And I slipped all my clutch plates into position. Now I have to install the locking ring. So the locking ring, I like to kind of keep the opening right in between one of these teeth. I don't know if it really matters, but that's how I like to do it. So let's see here. Just like that. Okay. The circlip is in place. You can undo the center bolt. Take the compressor tool off. Not sure what happened, but come on. Weird. Okay, now, like I said, you need to make sure your springs are actually in the little cups. If not, push them till they are. Like that one. Yeah, that one's not in the cup either. That one, good. 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 Okay. Yeah, that's kind of important actually. It'll be really weird on the clutch lever if you didn't get those into position. Make sure this one's good too. Okay, pretty good. All right, before I put the kickstart cover back on, I'm gonna replace the seal that's underneath this kickstart lever. So I went ahead and marked the position in comparison with the actual stem, because I think it's spring pressure on there. So if I take it off, I think it might go up a little further. And there's a whole other video you can make on how to set this thing up. You can find those videos online. But right now, let's get this thing off. Not too bad. Okay, grab a snap ring plier. All right, next step, remove the snap ring. Snap ring pliers here. Little washer. And there's your seal right there. Let me see what I can do to get that thing out. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Seal out. There's some oil behind it. All right, we wipe that down a little bit and we'll put the new seal in it. Okay, so I have a new seal right here, another Viton seal. I'll put some grease on this guy and then we'll go ahead and slip it over. And find a socket and we'll tap that guy back on. Okay, next I believe there's an O-ring underneath this lever. So let's get that off. Again, I'm going to mark how this thing is lined up, so when I take it off I know exactly how to put it back. Okay, two little dots. Get that guy off. O-ring right there. We'll replace that real quick and put it all back together. All right, we got the new O-ring installed into place. Put the washer back over. Snap ring. Put the arm back on. Okay, that's it. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the kickstart cover. Okay, so before we throw the kickstart cover back on, we had to put a new gasket on here. I had to modify this gasket a little bit. I had to trim this because this new chain guide is actually sticking out a little. So yeah, trimmed it so it fits. Now we can actually put the cover back on. Now there are two dowel pins. One goes here, one that goes in the front right here. Make sure you put those back in place before you install this thing. Okay, to help line the case up. So now it's just 10mm nuts with some washers all the way around. I think you torque them to, again, 3.6 foot-pounds, and that's it. So we'll do that now. Okay, I went ahead and torque down all the little nuts here, 3.6 foot-pounds. Put a little label here. It says no oil because there's no oil in it. I don't want to get too excited and start and go for a ride and forget there's no oil in there. So it's always good to write down a little note there for yourself. So I also put two new felt gaskets in the drain and the fill bolts. Last step is to put the little Kickstarter cover on. This thing was hard as a rock. I just had to heat it up with a heat gun. Okay. A little kicker pad on. So yeah, this side's done. All right, guys. Before I leave you all for tonight, the Yamabond 4 has had about 6 hours cure time. So we're gonna go ahead and check for air leaks again. So the idea is to pump it up to 300 minutes of mercury, which equals about 6 psi. It's supposed to hold 6 psi for a good 6 minutes without any leaks. If it does so, then you have no air leaks and you are good to go. You can put the rest of the fan shrouds on, whatever, put the exhaust on, whatever you got to do. So let's go ahead and pump the motor up and see what we get. Settle down a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna let it sit here for 6 minutes and see what happens. All right, it's been about 6 minutes, and it looks like we are good. This engine is airtight. Well, guys, I spent the entire weekend working on this thing, and we're getting close. It's gonna be tight, but I think we're gonna make it, barring any other major issues. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this thing tonight. If you guys have enjoyed these videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you all next time.